Hello, Tyler Bryden here. Hope everything's going well. It's a long weekend here in Canada. It's still cold. We're doing our best. We're trying to make it through. And what did we have? Obviously, last night, Leafs, a 6-1 loss to the Florida Panthers. The Biebers, present. Drake putting out bets. Leafs, 7-game series, game 7, loss. No surprise, really. Here we can see and crying. I will say, I'm not a true Leafs fan. I grew up a Detroit Red Wings fan. I had a glorious 20-year run. Yzerman, Shanahan, Chelios, Datsuk, Zuckerberg, Lindstrom. Just a glorious run of President's Cup trophies and Stanley Cup wins. But now I'm in the GTA. You get caught up in some of the hype, the delusion every single year. And even in my playoff bracket, I left all my research up to ChatGPT's deep research. But I had Toronto winning this series. And in my heart, I knew they weren't going to win, but I was rooting for them a little bit. Of course, that's not what happened. And here's a highlight reel of all the losses over the past 12 years. They lose every game 7. Haven't made it to Eastern Conference Finals. Since 2001-2002 season is what I saw. So if you're a Leafs fan, I'm sorry. I feel bad for you. I hope it didn't make a difference. I don't know if it was the Bieber curse, the Drake curse, or just the Leafs themselves. But it's a very sad time for Leafs fans, and I'm curious to see what happens in the postseason now after a long run with this team makeup, the Mariners, the Matthew. They've got Nyes, who's obviously a good player here. Tavares, free agent. I'm not really sure what the Leafs look like next year, and every year is the same. Good regular season team. All of these fans forget about all the other years. I say this year is the year, and just to watch, guess some credit there. There's the triangle of hope for Leafs fans, and the award. It's time to go golfing, and heartbreak for the Leafs again. So I'll stop prodding and poking here. Again, I'm almost a fan. I'll jump on the bandwagon when they're going to make it through a couple of series here, perhaps. But for now, I'll cheer for my family, for my friends who have so much passion and love for this team. While I get a kick out of both them winning and losing too. So what else do we got going on? I've been pretty, I would say, news heavy on these videos here. I compile a bunch of tweets from the stories that I was reading that week. And there's a strategy to that, is that obviously these are trending things. These are popular. They're graphics that appear on the thumbnails in the video because I'm chopping up one long vertical video and putting it into shorts. But at the same time, it's been a relatively exhausting, I would say, 3 to 6 month run. There was the American election and then the Canadian election here. And although things have maybe settled a bit for Canadians, at least knowing the outcome of the election, it's still a pretty janky time. We've got all this rage about Carney and the lack of a budget, and he says there's no budget coming, but then the pressure comes, and now there is going to be a budget in the fall, and this was after some intense pressure. We've also got Carney in his cabinet, and really what looks like a recycling of the exact same people that were in power before. We had the story break that Carney secretly dropped the U.S. tariffs mid-election and then continued to lie to Canadians about it. This was a Bloomberg story. Then anger about the housing minister saying there's no affordability issue in Canadian housing. We're going to keep those prices propped up. No new pipelines. We have enough. No federal budget. Then we had talk about, Gaza, Israel, and you put that all together. It's just a nightmare, a mess, a sea of crap to just wade through. And frankly, it's a bit exhausting. And I'm not sure if that's intentionally or unintentionally that strategy where you just run the board with information until people just get overwhelmed and give up. But that's how I'm feeling right now. And it's this interesting contradiction where the content that I'm creating around politics, even that sub-niche of Canada, is performing well in these videos. But two sides. One, personally, it's exhausting. Second, those views are relatively, I appreciate the views, but from, say, a revenue generation standpoint from YouTube, relatively worthless. And I did the calculation, I'm doing about 250,000 views per month. And this is almost strictly through shorts. There's some legacy, longer form YouTube videos that are doing well, but I'd have to get about 100 million views to, say, earn $20,000 per month through YouTube. And even with me pumping out videos, say every 2 hours in shorts format like this, I don't see myself crossing that threshold anytime soon, even getting anywhere near that threshold. And of course, I could probably do different styles of video with editing and graphics and all that stuff. For whatever reason, I personally feel incapable, uninspired, unwilling to dedicate that time, especially with a company full time and then a baby on the way. And so here I am recording on this long weekend. I'm really just trying to reorient myself, share, obviously looking for some feedback. Most of the feedback I get right now is either anger in the comments about the politics that I'm talking about. So that isn't either ideal either, or that I need to just shave my head because my hair is so brutal and I cut it a little short. I'm sure I'll get some more comments about it anyways. My wife likes it. And as a person, as I say, a creator, although people get tired of that word, I'm in a state of flux. I'm in a state of transition and really trying to understand what's best, what's next for myself, both personally and professionally. And a lot of this has been accelerated by a tragedy in the family that I haven't really been able to talk about, and I don't think I am really able to talk about, but something that's affected my family, my wife, her family, and has been just a terrible tragedy that we've all had to deal with over the last month and a half. And so that also changes your perspective, changes your goals, your ambitions, it changes your priorities, and has forced me to really sift and figure out what I want to do, what am I trying to accomplish, what is even meaningful and providing me with purpose and joy in life. And sometimes that's easy to find, and sometimes that's not easy to find, especially when you're navigating through a crisis and tragedy with the people that you care about most. There are a few things that are meaningful for me right now. I obviously know, and I shared, I've got a daughter on the way coming most likely end of August here. And so that's a huge mental shift and energy that I'm bringing into this world by choice, responsibility, something that I've looked forward to doing for many years. And it's difficult that this tragedy has had such an impact on the excitement and joy around this. And so doing our best to navigate through that, to remember how important and exciting this is. And so I'm reading this book, Strong Fathers, Strong Daughters, 10 Secrets Every Father Should Know. Meg Meeker, MD. She also is the author of Raising a Strong Daughter in a Toxic Culture. And I will say there's definitely some religious, conservative leaning to this book, but I wanted to check out something that was specifically about having a daughter and instead of more generalized advice. And so it's been really interesting. Now I'm only part way into this book, but one of the things that stuck out immediately to me was just the amount of information and media that young girls are exposed to. So much of it which is sexualized, so much of it which is generating this worldview, this bias, this message that you must be beautiful, you must be sexual, you must be intelligent, you must be submissive. All these things that have for so long been part of culture, but then have just accelerated through mass media and then the internet. And then, of course, now social media with reinforcement of that through obviously your own social network and peers, but then filters and surgery and all these things to just really distort the view of young women and girls today. And so that's something that immediately as I read this book, I was like, this is pretty terrifying. And I think that was one of the message and thing that I took away from this, which is you are the first love that your daughter will have. You are responsible for setting a model for them of what they value, what they'll look like eventually in a partner. How you treat your wife and your partner has such an impact on their own view of that. And so this responsibility, which is like awe-inspiring and in many ways overwhelming. And for myself, I'm doing my best to try to step up to the plate to be that best version of myself. And it's been difficult with everything that's going on, but I'm doing my best, at least in my control, that I can, continuing to exercise and work out, being sober. I'm almost 9 months sober now, which gives me a lot more control over stress, helps me regulate sleep better, helps me have a clearer mind, all things which I think are going to be very important when this baby comes. And I have a struggle when sleep gets disrupted, and then if I'm smoking marijuana or things like that, I can enter these manic states where there's this wonderful creative energy, but it's also this distortion and difficulty coping that can happen. And so I've made that intentional choice. And part of it is I feel better now. Part of it is that streak that I don't want to see. And part of it is knowing that I have this daughter coming into the world and that I want to be that best version of myself for when she comes. And I've said this before, but if somehow you watch this video, you've got any advice for me, whether it's daughter, whether it's son, but you think there's something that you heard from me and maybe something to share, feel encouraged. I'm still in information mode right now, gathering, and both very excited and nervous for this next chapter of my life, which is coming relatively soon. I also got some great advice from one person, which is you don't need to know everything right now. And a lot of the stuff is reactive, adaptive, iterative learning as events happen, as situations happen. You don't have this Rolodex, this index in your head that you can just call from any time. And even that couple of books that I'm reading, it's just so information dense. It's not really going to be retrievable as these moments arise. What I think is really fascinating is that there's going to be a generation of babies right now who a lot of the advice that they get, a lot of the information that is generated is going to be coming from AI, things like ChatGPT, like Claude, where you have a problem, you have this memory understanding of you, your child, and you're asking for advice or what to do in this exact moment through a conversational manner, adding context, sending pictures, videos, whatever it is. And that will be an incredibly strong, powerful guide to help you resolve these situations and figure these things out. It's also a little bit creepy that AI may have such a huge role in impacting the upbringing of our children. And I do think there is some belief and trust that these are relatively truth-seeking engines, that they're trying to provide a good experience, that they're not trying to provide any harm to your children. But of course, there are still questions of bias and where the original information came from, and all these interesting parts that make this beautiful, interesting time in the world where technology and the upbringing of children is taking place. So that's been a huge thing on my mind. And that's not the only thing that I've been thinking about. It's also been, what does the future look like for my children? What will they be doing? What are the skills that I should be teaching them? And obviously we're then in this world of ever expanding technology and that reach into our daily lives. And I don't think that's going to be any different for this generation that is being born now. So there are a few pieces that I've been curiously looking at, both for my children and my own sense of self-survival, knowing that I need to provide and try to provide that quality of life for them as they continue to grow. And there's obviously some very interesting views on what this type of technology is going to do for our experience as humans. I would say there's one, which is this technological innovation will create some abundance. It will create an entirely new subset of jobs that we can't even imagine today. And overall, this will be a positive thing, as technology has been for a long time. And of course, there's disruption as part of it, but that disruption leads to a better world. And we can look statistically and see that many markers of objective human quality of life have improved, even though we know that there are problems that emerge and exist today. The other side is more what Chris Sacca here is saying, which you can see how Tim Ferriss summarized it. We're super fucked. So let's take a listen to Chris, and he's a pretty passionate guy all the time. Let's see what he has to say.
I think other than most computer science, like the highest level of computer science, almost all of the rest of coding is fucking useless now, right? You and I can go to ChatGPT and be like, I want to build an app that does this and this, and give me the code, and it spits out the code. And then I've literally said, hey, by the way, I haven't coded since basic. What do I do with this? And it's, oh, no problem. Go here, download this, open this Python thing, and then shove it in here, and then do this. And it just talks you through it. And now it'll be agentic, and an agent's going to do all that for you. You just don't need to fucking do it anymore. Would you send your kid to law school right now?
No, definitely not.
Oh, dude, we have fewer lawyers at our firm now than we did a year ago. It's just fucking great. And I can tell it, hey, what? Great job. Do it again. Do it again. do it again. Hey, what I forgot to tell you, we have all the leverage. Oh, in this case, do this. Hey, add this. Hey, write out the Exhibit A schedule of services, which usually takes a couple hours. And dude, it's just fucking good. Would you teach your kid accounting, accounts receivable, accounts payable, like bookkeeping right now?
So what would you teach your kids?
Would you have your kids write marketing copy? Would you train them to write any news other than writing for the very top newspapers?
No, probably not.
Dude, go down the list of fucking skills, man.
So what's left?
Here's my grand theory. We are super fucked.
So there you go. And obviously this was part of a longer conversation. You can read that, and this obviously sparks some conversation online and a lot of, hey, teach them relational things, teach them things that are more human, things that are in person, and things that are hard for robots. Humanoid robots are years, decades away from being mass implemented. And so there's still a long lifetime for that. But if I look at my kid and they're going to enter the workforce in 20 years, those decades are going to move by pretty quickly. And it's obviously a very different world that we're living in. Interesting thing I saw with this interview with Sundar and David Friedberg this week was the importance and value of things like Electricians as we head into this next layer of implementation. Now, I don't know how long that is, but a massive shortage, and that's one of their technological limiters that Alphabet, Microsoft, NVIDIA, these companies are facing as they try to deploy massive data centers across the world. You need high quality electricians. And I think when business, you're taught in many ways is to try to find that blue ocean instead of the red ocean where all the sharks are there and churning up and there's blood because there's competition. You go to these places where there's demand and that demand is underserved. And so you can procure a margin because of that. And so again, back to my child, I'm asking myself, okay, how can I prepare them for that in 20 years? And then I'm also looking at that myself because things are happening very quickly in technology. Even since starting Speak AI, the amount of changes that we've seen, we started with rudimentary transcription with barely any speaker identification and poor accuracy and poor understanding of accents, and then custom sentiment models with janky evaluation where you had to convert transcript to text in a specific format, and then named entity recognition where you extract out all these keywords and then count them, to now these omnipresent, omnipotent models that are incredibly intelligent, responsive with low latency, considering the amount of work that they're doing, which you can command as soon as you come up with that idea to do it, and it will execute it for you. And so even in my own business and life, besides my daughter, of what her life looks like in 20 years, we have to ask the question of what does our life look like in 2 years, 3 years, 5 years, 10 years, especially if you're a parent in this world where there's been affordability issues, there's been inflation issues, and you're trying to provide a good life for your child and your family. And we're already seeing things like Microsoft, Satya Nadella saying that we're generating 20 to 30% of Microsoft's code through AI. And here's Satya. Now, there was some pushback from Sam Altman saying, okay, this is an interesting number, and is it the quality of code? How much of it is in production? How much of it is reliable? But still, even for someone like him, he's already seen the original seed of where something was and where it can go so quickly with the adoption curve that we're on right now. If this is where we're already with Microsoft, where are things going? So let's listen to Satya for a second.
Tracking. One is the accept rates itself, right? That's whatever, 30, 40, it's going up monotonically. And it depends, like one of the big challenges we had for a long time is a lot of our code is still C++, C#, and C# is pretty good, but C++ it was not that great. Python is fantastic. So we've now get better at that. So as language support has increased, the code completions have gotten good. The place where the agentic code still, it's nascent. For new greenfield, it's very, very high. But as I said, nothing is greenfield in many cases. And so therefore, I would say maybe at this point, the PR, by the way, code reviews are very high. So in fact, the agents we have for reviewing code that usage is increased. And so I'd say maybe 20-30% of the code that is inside of our repos today in some of our projects are probably all written by software.
And so you could say this is why some of Microsoft's products suck and all the messaging that comes. But this is a very interesting, relatively maybe terrifying trend, especially for developers who are used to a very cozy lifestyle and the ability to command very high wages because of the value they've created and the inability to create high quality code. That limiter has now been really broken with AI that understand entire code bases, that can understand what you're trying to achieve, works directly with GitHub, works with your code repositories. It's a threat to the quality of life, I believe, for many people, not just developers, but many people working in technology today. And they may need to adapt and pivot their career based on this. Now, again, maybe there's people who have these high quality relationships. There's these deep expertise that people have that you can't replace directly with technology. There's relationship selling. There's in-person physical events that need people, not just AI, but there is a significant portion of the economy right now and workforce that is having their value eroded by this technology. And we can see the impact of this right here. Of course, Microsoft is still hiring and growing, but they're accomplishing more with less. And we're seeing about 3% of its workforce, that's 6,000 people laid off. And notably, there were some people who seemed like they had been there for a very long time in important roles with great contributions to Microsoft and even technology in general. I'm thinking of one person who had contributed deeply to TypeScript and was still laid off. Some people would consider them top of the line quality in considering the rest of the world and their talent and expertise. And yet they're still gone. And of course, we've had things like Cursor, which have crossed over 100 million ARR in just rapid succession. It's unbelievable the adoption of this company, which from developers I've talked to is irreplaceable at this moment and just incredibly valuable and speeding up the amount of development just tenfold. I don't even know what fold. And not only that, even specifically related to Speak AI, there's been problems that we've faced for years, but only through Cursor's understanding of our entire code base and what we were trying to achieve, we've been able to break through some of these barriers that were not previously achievable, especially with a small team like ours. You then introduce things like OpenAI Codex after they bought Windsurf for billions of dollars, showing the value that is there. And Sam Altman in a recent interview talks about how this layer of AI is essential and crucial to OpenAI. So we know this is a continued path of acceleration and quality that we will see. So it's a very interesting time if you work in technology, and if you're not at least questioning or considering there may be some challenges ahead or some need to adapt, you're probably not in the right headspace. And of course, again, there may be an abundance of opportunities that emerges in new jobs that are ready and available that you can transition into easily based on your skill set, but you need to be prepared and you need to be heads up and seeking those opportunities depending on where you are at and what you're doing in your career. I think one of the most recent examples of this was Apple saying that searches in its Safari browser declined for the first time in April. So this was from Bloomberg. We know why this is. There's been a huge shift to AI, large language model systems for the searching and interacting with information. 6 months ago, 86% ChatGPT. What's interesting is it drops a little bit when DeepSeek explodes. But if we fast forward to today, ChatGPT continues to gain dominance here with 80%. And I think this trend is not going away anytime soon, especially with the inclusion of memory into these systems, the value of thread-based activities and conversational interaction and multimodality. And of course, we know Google is working hard to adapt to this, but still there is a massive pool of workers who specialized in SEO, who have driven the business growth for so many years through that channel. And that's something that I spent many hours and years developing to see that eradicated very quickly. And of course, yes, there's these edge cases and there's types of searches where we're seeing that value continue to be there in search-based platforms. I think if we're being honest, that's going to continue to dwindle, and we're almost on an island that continues to get smaller. And that's impacting Alphabet here. When that news came out from Apple, that was the biggest loss since October 2023 and its seventh biggest loss in the last 20 years, as Apple looks to include AI search in its browser. And you can see I have to scroll down pretty low to hit that bottom on this chart. And yes, I think there is criteria. There is questions of, is that credible? Is that an overreaction? And I think Sundar did a great job in this interview answering Friedberg's question, which weren't always easy questions. But that innovator's dilemma that they're talking about, even in this conversation, is very clear right now, and a threat to their profit driver, their revenue driver, and is a threat to many knowledge workers, marketers, and businesses today. And there's the professional impact of that, which is, again, frankly terrifying. But then there's the more personal one. And we have Zuckerberg here. This story came out here is that Zuckerberg is now trying to generate these AI friendships. And I think, unfortunately, when I go back to that, notes about the challenges that young girls are having with mental health. And I think this male loneliness epidemic that people are talking about, maybe making fun about as well too, but it's true. We see the impact of loneliness. It's equivalent to smoking a pack of cigarettes a day. It's something that I feel myself, but we're headed into a world where technology is now the interface for so many of us. GPT is often one of the first sources I go to for trustworthy information, where many of us would seek friends and family, or at the very least maybe go to the library and pick up a book. It's a very interesting time. And now we have JCal here with, I think, some not unnecessary shade at Zuckerberg, especially knowing the impact of the technology that he's brought into the world on civilization, on mental health, especially of young people, and both the connection and disconnection that we hear, that we feel today. But let's listen to Zuckerberg talk about how he is viewing AI friendship and relationships with technology.
I think as the personalization loop kicks in and the AI just starts to get to know you better and better, I think that will just be really compelling. One thing just from working on social media for a long time is there's the stat that I always think is crazy. The average American, I think it's fewer than 3 friends, 3 people that they'd consider friends. And the average person has demand for meaningfully more. I think it's 15 friends or something. I guess there's probably some point where you're like, all right, I'm just too busy. I can't deal with more people. But the average person wants more connectivity, connection than they have. So there's a lot of questions that people ask of stuff like, okay, is this going to replace in-person connections or real life connections? And my default is that the answer to that is probably no. I think that there are all these things that are better about kind of physical connections when you can have them. But the reality is that people just don't have the connection, and they feel more alone a lot of the time than they would like. So I think that a lot of these things that today there might be a little bit of a stigma around, I would guess that over time we will find the vocabulary as a society to be able to articulate why that is valuable, and why the people who are doing these things are, like, why they are rational for doing it, and how it is adding value for their lives. But also I think that the field is very early. I mean, it's like, I think there are a handful of companies and stuff who are doing virtual therapist, and there's like virtual girlfriend type stuff, but it's very early.
And so this idea of stigma being part of it, or as he talks about, just being early. And so it's not widely accepted in a way, but I think we are in a spot where this will be more adopted. We will start having deeper relationships with technology as they become more personalized. I know the relationship with ChatGPT has broadened over time, and I've also seen them try to take cracks at introducing languages and saying, oh man, or hey brother, or whatever these things are, as it understands the way that you communicate and tries to build that more deep relationship. And then we've seen the sci-fi, the her, and all of this stuff. It's obvious that we're on this path in many ways, and that as much as many of us value human relationships and in-person contact, there is a part of society which does not value that as much anymore, and is getting huge validation and stimulation, and at least perception of connection through technology. And whether that's relationships with things like Replica or ChatGPT, or even just video games, we're seeing a split and a division in how we think about true, authentic connection in the world and what makes us feel good and what doesn't make us feel good. And I do think there is obviously a deep connection to the loneliness that many of us feel right now and the constant technology that surrounds us every single day. And I just think a few more things that prove out that theory or thesis I'm working around intelligence going to zero and that we're heading for a drastic change in society. Cody here in SEMrush, which is a tool to monitor SEO and paid advertising on search, showing an image here, and what he's showing is that there is a huge spike in this search for AI agent. New ones are emerging every single month. They're spiking. More use cases are emerging and showing that the adoption or the desired adoption for autonomous agents running parts of our business or life is growing. The awareness is growing. We're still early, but that we can interpret this trend as a path towards technology autonomously running large parts of our personal life and business. And we had the constant messages like this where tech hiring is dead and it's not coming back, and there was this ZERP age that we were in. And between that and then the evolution of these AIs, this highly desired role is no longer commanding the same value, same shine, and same demand that it was. And again, there's a huge population that has been trained specifically for this, that saw this as their golden ticket, which may find that's not true. And of course, there's this argument about the 2-person, the 3-person, the 10-person billion-dollar company that's made by this, but that's a very small pocket of people who are going to be able to successfully execute that, and it leaves a huge percentage of the population on the outside looking in. And of course, we've got things like CEO of Fiverr sending this message out about not wanting to sugarcoat reality and that AI is coming and that it doesn't matter if you're a programmer, a designer, a product manager, a data scientist, a finance person, AI is coming for you. And what we considered easy tasks will no longer exist. Hard tasks will be easy, and only impossible tasks will be the new hard. You have to be exceptional. And he's, I think, going through his own even existential dread as a CEO here at Fiverr, with a huge part of their business impacted by these changes that are coming to the world. And then we have the Cloudflare CEO dropping just crazy numbers on AI's impact on web traffic. 10 years ago, Google scraped 2 pages to send 1 visitor. Today, it scrapes 6 to send 1 visitor. OpenAI, 250 to 1. Anthropic, 6,000 to 1. Saying that the web business today can't survive, and that web browsing, active web browsing by people, is possibly ending, most likely ending, at least a huge percentage of it, and AI agents will soon browse and do this for us. And so that's my little summary of, I think, the world state today. I skipped over some of the politics to focus on AI and technology, the impact that it's having on us as people in the workforce today, and also us as people who are we're about to raise the next generation, and questioning how can we build a successful, productive, meaningful, purposeful life for them. And based on what we're seeing, it might not be the easiest thing, and we're going to need to be ready to adapt. We're going to need to be ready for change, and there's going to be a lot of flux in our lives moving forward, especially when you pin that together with huge debt loads, Ray Dalio's end of a civilization moment that we're in, a lot of divisiveness in politics and global geopolitics, and a lot of people who feel they haven't necessarily got a fair shot at life and look at the generations before them as the reason that it is that way. And so I'm here doing my best to navigate through. I hope I shared something meaningful or insightful for you here today. And as always, I look forward to seeing you again soon. Bye-bye.